In today's video, we're going to build a new dungeon scene, complete with a few new items like this pressure plate, a pushable statue, and a barred door, all that our player can interact with. And these will be useful tools that you'll be able to use to create your own simple puzzles in your own game. Hi, my name is Michael, and welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. We are learning how to build a top-down 2D game that features action, adventure, and RPG mechanics all in Godot 4 using GDScript. Before we get really into this one today, let's go ahead and grab all the files that we're going to need. If you go to the itch.io page, you're going to find several new files that are needed here. We've got a dungeon sprite sheet, dungeon entrance, dungeon props, updated items, and actually we won't use that one in this video, but go ahead and grab it. And then a couple sound effects for our levers and pushing stone. So first, let's go to our TileMaps folder, open the sprites folder, open that in the file manager. And in this folder, we're going to go ahead and place the dungeon entrance and dungeon PNGs, just like so. Then we'll go to our interactables folder. And in here, let's go ahead and create a new folder. And I'm just going to actually create a whole folder for our dungeon in here. So we'll just call it dungeon. And then we can open that folder and we can place all the other new files here except for the items into this dungeon folder. And then of course we can navigate to our items folder, sprites, and just update the item PNG. We'll use this probably in the next video, but there's just a key item added to that sprite sheet. So we've got all of our files in, and next I want to show you what we're going to do with some of them, but I'm going to fast forward. Okay, so what I've gone ahead and done is something that you can replicate on your own, but I'll just show you the work. So first off, in TileMaps, I've created a new tile map for my dungeon, called it Dungeon01 tile map. And you can see that in this tile map, if I go to the tile set editor, I've added the dungeon PNG. And then made sure that our tile set is set up with 32 by 32 pixel tile size. Added a physics layer with collision layer for layer 5 turned on. And then I've painted in that layer. It's a pretty straightforward tile map for the most part. It's just, you know, regular boxes with the exception of these little bits around the doorway entrances here. And yeah. The other thing is make sure that if you set this dungeon tile map up, that it's got the script for our level tile map, which is, as you recall, allows it to get the tile map bounds when we load a new level. And then in addition to this new tile map, I've also gone ahead and created in my levels folder, a folder for our dungeon. And I've created two maps, and we'll just be working on this first one today. But I just created a simple small room with a door on the bottom and a door on the top. So that this would be like the entrance to the dungeon or exit of the dungeon, and then a door to the next room. And this scene is a level scene, so it's got the level script. I've got my dungeon tile map, and I've added a player spawn point so that I can test the scene. And I'm just going to press F6 and let's run it. So here we go. Got a simple scene, just a small room where we're going to build our first puzzle element. Now, we're not going to be building any intricate puzzles today, but what we are going to be building are a few elements that we can use to start crafting some of the puzzles and challenges within this dungeon. Now, one thing we do need to do before we begin working on these elements for our dungeon is I want to connect our scene 01 to the dungeon. And one of the assets that we brought in was this new dungeon entrance PNG. So I'm going to go ahead and just open, let's open the grass tile map. And then if we select this, I will show this bit of work, even though I didn't cover how I did the tile map for the other one. And you can check out the tile map video I've done in this series if you need help there. But something that's new that we haven't done yet is just having a second sprite sheet within our tiles. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the dungeon entrance. Oops, I need to be on tile set to be able to do this. So drag the dungeon entrance in this tiles panel while you're in the tile set editor, and it'll add a new one. And yeah, we'll go ahead and tell it yes, we want to create the atlas. So there we go. It created our grid based on our settings. And then before we can use this, we just need to real quick paint in our physics layers which, you know, by default, we've got this nice box, which is exactly what we need. And I'm just going to paint in, we need something like that, except let's adjust these side ones. And I'm not going to be too perfect with this. I've got snapping on to half pixel snap, by the way. But I'm just going to go ahead and paint those, press H to flip it horizontally, and something like that. That should be sufficient for what we need. Go ahead and save this. So now if I go to my area 1 map, and let's see, select the grass. Now we've got 2 sections in our tiles for our tile map. So I'm just going to come in here and select this whole dungeon entrance thing. Make sure we're in the draw mode. Turn off random. I had that on for doing the ground in my dungeon. And then just pick a spot where we want to place this. I don't know, over here maybe. And just plop that on there. Okay, so we've got our dungeon entrance. And so now if we run our game with this scene, you can see we've got our dungeon entrance. Let's just make sure we can walk in it. Yeah, it's kind of goofy that his head overlaps, but don't worry about that. We're gonna make the player enter before he gets that far in to the entrance. But man, that guy killed me. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and add an area transition like right about here, you know, so that the player just goes into the dungeon. And let's do that. Let's just duplicate one of these level transitions. Level transition 3 is fine. And I'm going to change this to be top entrance. Wonder why it updated level transition 2. Okay, that was just a bug. There must be a little bug in our code, but clearly it's not sticking. I'm going to go ahead and just move this level transition just, I don't know, somewhere about here. I'm not sure exactly where. Just try and center it roughly. I'm going to go ahead and save that. We could snap it to grid, but I don't really want it that high up. So again, I'm just going to drag it back down. And then in our dungeon 01 scene, let's see, that's our tile map. I'm going to close that. Okay, so our dungeon level 01, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go up here, Shift Control A, look for level transition. It added it up here in the top left corner because that's where my 0 is. And this is on the bottom, so we'll just configure that. And I'm going to just drag it roughly same area, probably right about here. Well, let's do it. Let's do it, I don't know, right about there. And actually, I'm going to snap to grid and then, yeah, okay. That looks pretty good. Now, let's go ahead and configure this one. So the level that it should teleport us to is area 011, and it's going to be targeting level transition 3. We'll go ahead and save that. And then if we look at area 1, let's update the level that this points to, because it should point to dungeon 01, scene 1, and then just level transition is fine there. So if we test this, we should have a workable transition. And just see if I can get past this goblin real quick. Okay, there we go. So that works. And we can go back. Now I do want to do one thing. We can, right now our transitions are set to have us kind of positioned in relation to how we enter the previous one. But I don't really want that in this case. So what I want to do with these is I don't, when I'm entering and exiting a dungeon, I actually want the player to always enter and exit in the center. So what we're going to do is go to our level transition script, and we're going to just make a couple small changes here. Now, first thing we're going to do is up in our export variables, we're going to add a new export variable that we'll just call this, let's see, center player, I guess. And it'll be a Boolean. And by default, it will be set to false. So that, and if it's false, it'll continue to function how it's worked previously. Then what we can do is go down, we've got a function in here called getOffset. And we call this anytime the player enters, and we use it to calculate what the player offset is from the level transition they just entered, so that we know where to spit them out on the other side. And what we're going to do in here is where we set the offset Y, we're going to do a check first. We're going to say if center player equals true, then we're going to do something different. We'll just set the offset, in this case, Y equal to 0. And then we can go else, do it that way. So we just created a small condition, right? So that if it's centered, we're just going to do 0. And then we'll do the same thing down here, except obviously this one's doing offset X. So if center player equals true, offset dot X equals 0, like that. Else, use this little equation. Okay, so go ahead and save that. Let's go back to our scenes. And for this level transition 3, I'm going to set center player to on. And I'm not sure why that. Okay, on. And then let's go to our dungeon transition. We'll do the same thing here. Turn that on. And let's run that. So now, even if I enter slightly to the side of this door, it should just be right in the center. Yeah, and then likewise. Okay, there we go. That's simple. That also makes it so that we don't have to worry about the width of these entrances being slightly different, because they kind of are. I don't think it would have caused an issue, but you never know. And but that way we've got a nice, safe center entrance to this new dungeon area. Okay, so now that we've got some things set up, we're going to be creating 3 particular elements for creating puzzles. One is going to be a barred door that the player can't pass through unless it's opened by a special trigger. We're going to create a statue that the player can push. And what we're going to build right now is a small pressure plate, like a button that the player can step on, or that we could eventually push the statue onto to activate the door. And so let's start by creating this pressure plate. So the first thing we need to do this is let's go to our interactables folder. We've got this new dungeon folder, and I'm just going to create a new scene underneath here, and we'll call it pressure plate. Now our pressure plate scene looks good. I'm actually going to go ahead and real quick create a new folder here in the dungeon interactables, not a scene. Create a new folder, and we'll just call it scripts. And we'll create a script for our pressure plate. So create new script, pressure plate. And we'll just add that to our scene. Okay, there we go. Now our pressure plate is going to need a few things, right? We need a sprite to display it. We're going to need an area 2D that we're going to use to detect when the player or other objects are on top of it. And then we're going to add an audio stream player so that we can have some sound effects for it. So let's add our sprite 2D. Oops, I want to do Control A, sprite 2D. And then let's add the area 2D. And then let's add our audio stream player 2D. Okay, before we finish our area 2D, let's add our sprite. So the sprite that we're going to use is this dungeon props. And you'll see that it's got a lot going on in here. We just need one section of these buttons. And so in order to do so, we're not going to use animation, we're going to use region. So let's enable the region, and then just go in here to edit it. Make sure you turn pixel snap on if you're going to size this manually. And by default, we want the button in its up state, which is this one right here. So I'm just going to resize that like so. There we go. Okay, so there's our button. Now let's go ahead and add, let's see, what do we want to add? We need a collision shape 2D for our area 2D. And I'm going to just put a simple rectangle shape in there. And this rectangle shape, actually that was kind of serendipitous. It's like the exact size, but I actually want it to be smaller. And the reason being is that if it's this size, then even if the player is barely overlapping it, it's going to push the button and it's going to look kind of funky. So, I mean, you can change this and test this on your own, but I'm just going to make the pressable area pretty small, something like that. Okay. And I think we're pretty well set up. So I'm going to go ahead and save this and actually go over to our dungeon real quick. And I just want to add one of these pressure plates to the dungeon. Right there. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and line this up nicely so that it matches. And it's not going to do anything just yet, so I'm not going to test the game, but there we go. We've got a little pressure plate in our scene. So if we head back over here to our pressure plate, let's open the script and let's make this bad boy work. So let's give it a class name. And it'll extend, we can make it extend node 2D. Our pressure plate's going to have 2 signals, one when it's activated and one when it's deactivated. So we can add those. And by activated, I mean like pressed. I don't know. You could change those names if you want to, but I'm going to go with what I said there. We're going to have a couple variables. We're going to have one that we call bodies. This is going to be an integer that tracks how many collision bodies are on top of it. We'll have another variable called isActive, you know, whether it has been activated or not. And then we'll have, I'm going to have a variable, this will make sense later, but just a rectangle offset variable that's going to track where our sprite sheet needs to be. That'll make sense in just a moment. And then in order to make this guy work, we're going to want a reference to quite a few of our things. We definitely need our area 2D. So I'm going to drag that in. And we're going to want our audio stream player. Let's grab that sucker. I always like to shorten my audio stream player names to just audio. Let's see. We're going to need our sprite 2D. Oops, I didn't hold control. There we go. And I like to remove the underscore 2D, just call it sprite. And then one last thing, and let's add two more onReady variables. I want to get a reference to the sounds that we're going to play. So we're going to have an audio for activate, and audio files are of audio type audio stream. So you can just do that and put some quotes. Let me go ahead and copy this, and we're going to have an audio deactivate. Okay, so let's drag some streams in here. And actually, this isn't going to just be a quote. We're going to need to use this preload. What we're going to do is just preload these audio files right here. You could make these an export variable and change them. I don't know. I don't know why exactly I did it this way this time, other than seemed to make sense to me. Look at that. I typed quotes in there and it added them when I drug the file in. So let's go ahead and just delete that. So let's just put our files in here. So there, we're going to just preload these audio files. They'll be ready to play. And if you wanted to do this with an export variable and assign them, then it's not going to really change any of the code. It's only going to change how you declare the variables here, right? Instead of onReady, it would be export, and then you would remove the preload. So, you know, pick your poison there. So let's set up our ready function. And our ready function, we're going to subscribe or listen. I say subscribe. That comes from my day job. We're going to go ahead and connect to two signals from our area 2D. So we've got a body entered signal that we want to connect to. And we also have an area or body exited. We'll connect to that as well. And both of these obviously require us to provide something. So we'll create a new function that we call on body entered. And then we'll have one for on body exited. So let's go ahead and create these functions so that we can get rid of these warnings. Woo! Scrolling like crazy. And the on body entered and on body exited signals and functions need to receive the body, which is going to be of type node 2D. Okay. And doesn't return any value. We'll just go ahead and copy that, paste it, and call this one on body exited. Okay, there we go. We've got our two functions set up. We'll finish coding those out momentarily. I want to do one more thing in our ready function. We created this off_rect variable, and I'm going to set it equal to the sprite, and then get the region rectangle. What that is that's this variable right here. When we have this region, see the rect right there? So we're just going to grab that data. We're going to store that. And you'll see, because we want to change the region based on if it's pressed or not, right? So we'll just store the original one with this off rect, meaning the rectangle for when it's in its off state. And there we go. So what we're going to want to do, originally I had coded it so that as soon as we enter or exit, we just emit the signal, right? We've got the, like, on body entered. We could just say activated.emit and then do some other stuff. Okay. But I realized that that's not a very good solution. And I'll tell you why. It's because when we have a statue that we're pushing, you know, maybe the statue gets pushed onto the button, and then like the player could also be on the button, and then maybe one of them leaves but the other one is still on the button. It's gonna, when that body exit fires, it's gonna think that you're no longer pressing the button, but the statue's still there, right? I don't know if I explained that very well. So instead of just emitting a signal here, what we're gonna do is anytime a body enters, we're just going to add 1 to our bodies variable, right? So that we've got that variable up there that we've declared. And anytime a body exits, we'll do the opposite. We'll just subtract 1 from our bodies. And then what we can do is we'll create a new function right down here, and we'll call it check is activated. And what this is going to do is it's just going to, you know, look at how many bodies we have and determine if it's pressed or not. So if bodies is greater than 0, then we know that it's activated. But we also, we want to add one more clarifier on here. If it was already active, we don't want to really do this. So we'll say if the bodies are greater than 0 and is active equals false. Okay, so if there are more than 1 bodies after a change in the bodies and it was not active previously, then we're going to make it active. Okay, and then we'll also go ahead and we'll emit that activated signal. So activated.emit. And then we'll do 2 other things in here, but for now we'll just do that. Then we'll do another check, elif bodies, I'm going to say less than or equal to 0. It probably just should be equal 0, but I don't know. Less than or equal to 0 and is active equals true. So if it was true, if it was active and then suddenly there are no bodies on there, then we need to deactivate it. So we'll set is active to false. And we'll emit the deactivated. So deactivated.emit. Emit that signal, okay? And the reason we built these as signals is so that we can have another entity within our map. So if we go to our dungeon, this is going to emit a signal, right? That it was activated or deactivated. And then what we'll do is when we create our door, we'll connect those signals so that you'll see them respond to each other, okay? So let's see, back to our pressure plate script. Now, one thing that we can do, I'm going to go ahead, let's do one more step here and then we'll test it out. So let's grab our sprite and then let's change the region rect. The region rect, which is the rectangle. So that's a parameter here that we can access on our sprite 2D. And we'll just change the position actually. So in the case where we've activated it, then we want our X on our region rectangle to be our original rectangle, which we stored in the off rectangle. We'll grab that guy's position.x and we'll subtract 32 pixels off from it. Okay. Otherwise, oops, copy that. If it's off, then we'll just set it back to where it was. So now let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and press F6 and run my dungeon. So now if we walk over this, oh, well, hold on. That didn't work, did it? Let's go back to 2D. There, actually, I noticed, let's run that again. And there's 2 issues here. One is that it didn't press. And the other that you probably noticed is that the player's like behind it right there. We do not want that. There's a couple ways we could handle that. I'm going to go ahead and just let's go to our pressure plate and let's take our sprite 2D ordering. We'll give it a Z index of -1 and see if it fixes that layering issue. Let's test that out real quick. See if that looks okay. Okay, yeah, that works. Let's go back to pressure plate. Let's look at our area. We never configured our area, so let's review that. Monitoring should be on. It doesn't need to be monitorable, so we can turn that off. Let's look at our collision settings. We don't care what layer it's on. And it should have a layer mask of 1. Should have a layer mask of 5 and 9. So enemies and Our statue is going to be a wall. All those should be able to activate it. Let's go ahead and save that and run this one more time. Let's see if that works. Uh-oh. I wonder if I overlooked something on my code. Oh yeah, duh. Okay, on body entered. After we change the bodies, we need to run our check is activated function. Pretty big oversight there, right? Let's fix that up. Hit F6. I hope it works this time. Otherwise I'm gonna have egg on my face. There we go. So now you can see that it presses down and up. And as the player enters it, okay. Pretty cool. Let's just finish this out real quick. The one last thing that we haven't done with this little scene is make it play a sound effect, which we have preloaded those variables. So let's just create a function called play audio. And what we'll do is we'll just require this to pass in a stream, an audio stream, and we'll play whatever we pass in. So then what we'll do is we'll grab our audio object, set it to the stream that we pass in, and then simply play it, audio.play. Okay. And so this is pretty simple. We'll just come right in here into our check is activated function. And in the case where we're activating it, we'll play audio underscore activate. Let's go ahead and copy that line. Come down here and play audio deactivate. Okay, so if we run our scene one more time, then we should have a click sound effect. There we go. And it's audio, you know, we've got two versions, so it's a little bit distinct. Sounds different going down than up. Cool, so we've completed our pressure plate. Now we just need to create the other items that we need to hook up with it. Next up, let's create the barred door that's going to go here that the plate will be able to lower when it's activated. So let's see, let's go down to Dungeon Interactables and create a new scene. Okay, while we're here, let's go ahead and also create the script that we'll put on this door. And I'm going to drag that on here. Okay, so our barred door, similar to everything else. I mean, obviously we need a visual, so let's add the sprite 2D that we're going to need. I'm going to add a static body 2D. Now, a static body is a collision shape that's designed not to move, which we're not going to move this. We will disable it so that the player can walk through when it's open, but it doesn't move. No physics or anything like that. Okay, let's add an animation player, which we'll need to animate our door. And then we're going to want an audio stream player. All right, man, that should be good. So let's go ahead and start by setting up our sprite. And again, we're going to use our dungeon props. This time though, we're going to animate it, and we can go ahead and use the, this animation settings, right? So there are 7 horizontal frames and 1 vertical, and by default we'll be on frame 1 for the bars. And I'm going to go ahead and adjust the positioning of the sprite and the static body real quick. Actually, it's probably just the sprite right now. Let's move the sprite. I want the sprite, the location of this sprite sheet is going to kind of dictate when the player will be in front and behind it, right? So if we think of this origin as the base where it's touching the ground, that's how we can kind of position this. So I'm going to put it right about there. Okay, so if the player's behind these lines or this origin, then he'll be behind the door. Otherwise, he's in front of it. So that should be good. So let's configure our static body. We need to add a collision shape. We'll just get a collision shape 2D. Use a simple rectangle shape. And let's just drag this guy over here. Probably just line it up with the bottom of the spikes there. And then drag this across and up. And there we go. Okay, so this will block. And actually, we do need to configure this a little bit more, right? I mean, it's a static body, but we need to configure the collision. So it should be on layer 5, and it doesn't need any mask settings. Okay, go ahead and save that. Now in our animation player, we're going to need 4 animations. So first, we're going to have one called closed. We'll start by creating this one. And what we're going to keyframe is our sprite. So I'm going to go over here to the sprite frame and just key that. And then we also want to keyframe on our collision shape. So the child of our static body, we want to keyframe this disabled. So it's not disabled. I wish it was just called enabled for some reason. To me, that would make more sense, but we're just going to key this so that we can change that. So basically what we'll do is when it opens, we'll disable the collision shape, which means the player will be able to pass through. Okay, so the closed is just simply that, just those frames, no actual animations. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the closed, and we'll have one called opened. And it's going to be the same, except we're going to put the frame to, I can't remember if it's 6. No, it's going to be 5. Okay, so it's opened. And then we'll have disabled on our collision shape. Turns it gray, so it's no longer going to be active. Go ahead and save that. Then let's go ahead and let's duplicate opened. And we'll call this one open door. Okay. And we'll reset this first keyframe to 1. So it starts closed and then it'll slowly open. And I'm going to set the snapping here to 0.075 because that's the interval I want it at. So let's see. Let's go ahead and select our sprite, set the frame to 2, boink, and we can just click through and it'll just automatically add a few frames incrementing like that. Okay, so we've got a little animation of the door opening. Cool. And then what we need to do with this is we need to put our disabled frame at the end, and then at the beginning, we'll insert a key and just check that off. Okay, so it'll be enabled until it fully opens, then it'll disable. Go ahead and save that. And then let's duplicate this animation, and we'll call this close door. And we're just basically going to swap things. So I'm going to drag these left and right. And for these layers up here on the frames, if you click and drag and select all and come to edit and say scale selection, then in the scale ratio, we can type -1 and it'll just flip them. There we go. So now this animation closes the door. And actually we probably want, we want to change this keyframe for the disabled to be right there. There we go. In fact, you know what? There's no need for us to even let anything walk through. We'll just put that at the beginning because we don't want anything to be able to walk through when it's as soon as we trigger to close it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and save that. So we should have our 4 animations looking good. So actually I forgot to grab one of the assets that we need for this. There's another sound effect. So you can just go back to the itch.io page to grab that. But then I'm gonna open the dungeon here in the file manager, the dungeon folder. And then just grab this bars open sound effect and let's put that in the interactables. There we go. Okay. Once you've got that sound effect in there, let's go ahead and in the closed door, let's just add an audio playback track. And I'm going to put bars open in there. I guess we'll start it right at the beginning. Let's see how that sounds. Okay, seems pretty good. And then we'll just go down to, well, that was, yeah, closed door. We'll do open door. We'll do this. Actually, let's go to closed door. And I'm just going to copy the track, the audio track. And then let's go to open door and paste the track. Seems pretty good. Obviously, you could take this sound effect and have a different one for opening and closing. But for now, we'll just keep them the same because, you know, I'm not trying to build the most amazing effect at this moment, just something that works. Okay, so we've got open and close door, and they've now got their sound effects. There we go. So we've got our door that kind of works. Now, if we go back to our scene, let's just go back to our dungeon scene real quick. And let's put one of these doors on here. So I'm going to just drag the barred door out. Now positioning this, you know, could be a little bit finicky, but shouldn't be too hard. You can kind of line up the bricks on top and on bottom, make sure it looks good. Okay, so there we go. So we've got a door. Now if we run this scene, the door won't do anything. It should stop our player, but I mean, obviously this isn't going to open it yet. So let's hook that up real quick. So let's go ahead and finish the script for our barred door here, or I should say create it, because we haven't even started it. So yeah, let's start with our class name. And our barred door can extend to node 2D. We need one basic variable to track if it's open. By default, that'll be false. And then we need a reference to our animation player so we can play those animations. And then we're going to have an onReady function or a ready function, but don't have anything to put in there just yet. First, let's go ahead and set up some functions. So we need a function to be able to open the door. And we'll need a function to be able to close the door. And then let's go ahead and finish this out. So actually, right now, I guess all we need are these two functions. And we won't put anything in the ready function, I don't think, at this time. It's going to be pretty straightforward. So the open door is just going to take our animation player and play the open door animation. Okay. And then we'll just do the same thing on closed door, but obviously it'll be the closed door animation. And then what we can do is let's go back to our dungeon scene. So now that we've got a door with the animations and it's got some functions and we've got a pressure plate, we can actually connect the pressure plate. And I had the node tab open actually. We can connect the pressure plate to the barred door using this. So if you look next to your inspector, there's a tab called node and it's got a list of all the signals as well as groups. And we're not going to cover groups today, but we've dealt with signals exclusively through code up to this point in the tutorial. And actually that's kind of reverse compared to how a lot of people approach it. They tend to approach these signals first. I have a love-hate relationship with these signals. It's really handy. And in this case, it's almost necessary or the best way to do things. But I do tend to prefer connecting signals in my code so I know exactly what I'm doing. And I can see it in the code. Whereas if you have a signal that we connect with this inspector node section, it's going to only be visible when you click on this. We will get a little icon indicating that we've got signals connected. But here, this is actually the best way to do it. So we've got the two signals that are pressure plate that we've added, activated and deactivated. So what we can do is we can take activated and we can connect it. I just right clicked on it and select connect. And then we can select our barred door. And then it's trying to figure out what the receiver method should be. And since we've already created a script, we can go to pick and we can say open door. Say okay, and we'll connect. So now you can see that the barred door connected to this open door. And it's showing us here what it connected to. Okay. If we go back to 2D and select the pressure plate or keep it selected and go to deactivate, we can connect this again to the barred door. This time we'll pick the closed door function, say okay, and connect that. Now if we run this scene, the button should now open the door. And of course, it closes as soon as we walk off, right? Okay, so 2 steps in, we just need one more piece, and that's the statue that the player will be able to push on top of the button to hold the door open. So one thing is I added this is open variable. We don't need that. I think I added that because I'm thinking a little bit too far ahead. In the future, we probably need to have some way to potentially open these other than these animations. But until such a time arises, we're just going to go ahead and leave that as is. So this is it. It's very simple. And since our connection to the pressure plate is able to open and close the door, that's all we really need, right? If the door needed to have contain its own scripts to open and close it, then we could do more. But But there we go. So we'll just connect it with that. So just a little bit of cleanup there on that code to keep in mind. Okay, so let's go ahead and build that statue now. I'm going to go to my Dungeons, Interactables folder and create another new scene. This time, let's call this one, we'll call this one Pushable Statue. Okay, there we go. And then let's create a script for that. Create a new script in our scripts folder. Go ahead and apply that to our scene there. Okay, so our pushable statue, we're going to use a new node type actually here. We're going to change our type, and we want to use a rigid body 2D. You can see that this is under collision objects. It's next to, here, let me go ahead and clear this filter so I can show you. So it's next to the static body and the character body. So rigid bodies, normally we use them for physics interactions, and we're not going to be actually using true physics, but it's just seemed like the best solution when I was putting this together. So we'll go ahead and create that. Obviously, as always, we need to add our sprite 2D. And then let's add an audio stream player 2D. And obviously, since this is a rigid body, again, we need a collision shape. And I'm going to, again, leave this collision shape until we get our sprite set up. So for our sprite dungeon props, we're just going to plop that on there. We'll use region for this one to set it up and go ahead and edit that region. Let's see. Grab this guy and drag it over. So this statue that looks like our hero is what we're going for here. Go ahead and find that. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and move. I'm going to grab this sprite and I'm just going to move it up so that his base is more or less in the center there. And then for the collision shape, we'll just add a simple rectangle shape. And I'm going to drag this so that it kind of matches the size of his base. And it needs to move over a pixel. Okay, there we go. So for our pushable statue, let's go ahead and come down here. Deactivation. Let's lock the rotation. If we don't do this, then this physics body can be rotated as it gets pushed around and things like that, and we don't want that. And then underneath solver, actually, I don't need that. I don't think we need to do this. I think I did that as some debugging, but let's just turn the lock rotation on for now. Let's go down to our collision layers, put it on layer 5, so it's like a wall, and then we'll have it mask against layer 5 and layer 1, and probably the enemy layer, which I think is 9. Yeah, there we go. And we want to turn our gravity scale to 0. Otherwise, it's actually going to fall down because it thinks it's being used in like a, 2D game. Let's go ahead and open our pushable statue script. Give it that class name. And this is going to extend rigid body 2D because that's the kind of node we put it on. Now I'm going to give it an export variable. It's going to be called push speed. It'll be a float, and we'll set it equal to 30 to begin with. And then we need a variable to track the push direction, the direction it's being pushed. We'll set that up, and that's a vector 2. And by default, we want to set that to vector 2.0. And then let's go ahead and just grab a reference here to our audio stream player, and I'm going to rename that variable to just audio. Okay, and I think that's everything we need to set up as far as variables are concerned. Now, because this is a rigid body, we're going to move it, and we're going to do so in the physics process. So let's go ahead and declare our physics process function here. Give that delta and underscore. I'm not sure if we're going to use it or not. And all we're going to do in here is we're just going to give it a linear velocity. Rigid bodies are different than character bodies, so linear velocity is how we can set that movement on it. And what we'll do is we'll set the linear velocity to the push direction times the push speed And since our push direction is 0, it's not going to be going. And this is always going to happen. And then all we'll do to make it push is we'll change the linear velocity, or excuse me, the push direction. I guess let's do another thing. When we change our push direction, we also want to have a setter function. So we'll have it call a function called set push. So to do that, type the extra colon set equals set push, and we'll just create that function down here. And obviously, since this is a setter, it's going to need to get the value, which is a vector 2. Okay. And then the obvious thing we need to do here is set our push direction equal to the value. And then we'll do some other stuff here just in a bit. Okay, so we've got, let's see, that's set up. In order to make this push happen, I went back and forth numerous iterations on how to do this, and most of them had kind of buggy interaction issues or rendering issues, and a few of them had just overcomplicated code. And so I finally settled on a solution that I thought was pretty good. But in order to make it happen, we need to update our player real quick. So let's go open our player scene. Okay. Now in our player, we've got this interactions node, and underneath it, we've got an area 2D. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that area 2D, and I'm just going to rename it to push area. And real quick, I need to make this unique, this shape in here, so that I can change it without affecting the other one. And I'm going to just give it a pink color so that I can tell that it's different from the interaction area 2D. Let's just shrink this a little bit. I want to be able to see that collision shape. I guess it ends right about there. So yeah, let's drag this push area so it sticks out like 1 pixel past that. Okay. So what we're going to do is that this push area 2D, we're going to set it to monitoring to on and turn monitorable off. And then we'll go to the collision settings, and we're just going to have it look on layer 5. So just set the mask for layer 5 to on. And then we're going to create a new script for this. So in our player scripts folder, let's create a new script. And yeah, we'll just call this push area. Drag that onto our area 2D, and let's edit the script. And unlike normal, I'm not even going to give this one a class name right now. It'll extend area 2D. So we need a function, a ready function. And this is going to connect to the area's body entered and body exit signals. And we'll go ahead and just declare those names here on body entered, on body exited, and then create those functions. And this should take in a body. We'll say B, it's a node 2D. Okay, paste that there. We'll call this on body exited. And then these are going to be pretty straightforward. So all this area is doing is it's just monitoring, and anytime a body enters, we'll check if B is of type pushable statue. Then we'll just set the push direction. And we'll set it equal to whatever our player is currently doing. So player, let's get our player manager. Dot player. Dot direction. Okay. And anytime a body exits, if it's a pushable statue, we'll just set the push direction. Set it to vector 2.0. Okay, so that's all it's going to do. So this is just going to detect anytime it detects a statue, it's going to go ahead and start pushing it. So let's go ahead and add a statue right here. Let's see. Where am I at? Pushable statue. Boink. Grab that guy. Let's just set it right, I don't know, over here. Something like that. I'm just going to pop back into our pushable statue. So we've got a push speed and we're going to move in a direction at that speed. So if we run this scene and walk our player against the statue, it should move. There we go. Okay, pretty cool. Our player won't move through it. I mean, if you wanted to take this one step further, you could also have that push area kind of set the player into a push state and have a unique animation and things like that. But I'm not going to do that here. But as we push the statue on, because of the collision layer that it's on, it also makes that door work. So pretty cool. That's working pretty good. Now, the one last thing I want to do with the statue is give it a sound so it's like dragging across the floor. And then let's also go ahead and put an area transition area or level transition up here behind this door so we can go to the next scene. So looking back at the, let's see, let's go over to our pushable statue scene. We have an audio stream player. We've got this push stone wave. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on the stream of this audio stream player. Now the catch with this is it's not looping. It's not looping. By default, waves don't loop unless they have like loop points set. So if we have it selected here in our file system and then come up to import, which is hidden next to your scene, then we can come and set the loop mode to forward and re-import that wave file. And now it'll be loopable and it will loop by default when we play it. I'll go ahead and save that. So let's go in here, looking at our script here for this. When we set the push, we're just going to do the following. We're going to do a check. So if the push direction is vector 2.0, right, which means it's not being pushed, then we're going to grab our audio and just tell it to stop playing. Else, then we'll tell audio to play. Simple as that. Let's go ahead and go back to our dungeon scene. Let's test that by hitting F6. Let's just see what happens here. Okay, cool. It's making a sound. Whoop. Okay. Last step. Let's go ahead and duplicate this level transition. So we've got now level transition 2. I'm going to set this to be on the top. Oop. Didn't mean to deselect it. Let's see. Let's get to move. I don't want this level transition to be right about there. Okay. And then what we can do with this, I think that's on the grid too, actually. Ooh, it was close. Okay. I actually already created another area in the dungeon here. So if I go up to my dungeon, I've got a scene 02. Go ahead and grab that. And probably just going to transition to the regular level transition. And I'm actually going to turn off the center player. Let's open that scene. Dungeon 02. Boom. Okay, a bigger scene here. And Shift Control A to add a scene, and we'll add the level transition right down here. I'm going to snap that to the grid, set this to a bottom transition. Level transition 2. And let's see, levels, Dungeon 01, scene 1. Okay. I think we got everything set up. I'm going to come over here to Dungeon 1. Let's go ahead and run the scene. Solve our extremely simple puzzle here. There we go. Now we're into our next room. So what have we done today? Let's go back out. Let's see what happens. It worked, but the door's closed. The statue's back. We'll address that later. We can use our persistent data. We're going to have to extend it a little bit to support a position. But yeah, today we've created a couple cool things, set up a new style for our dungeon levels, added this pushable button, not the pushable button, but the pressure plate button, the pushable statue, and of course this gate, the barred door. And yeah, so I hope you guys learned something new. Next time we're going to be probably doing one more little mechanic, like finding a key that could be dropped by an enemy, or meeting some condition in a room, as well as a locked door. And who knows where we'll go from there. I appreciate everybody for watching. If you enjoy the video, please make sure you like and subscribe to my channel so that you can see when I post my next one. And as always, thanks for watching.